FoundHer Rising, the podcast for women founders in wellness, coaching, and consulting who are ready to step beyond one-to-one work and build businesses that create freedom, impact, and income. I'm your host, Christine Hakkola, business coach, former psychotherapist, and mentor to women scaling service-based businesses. Each week, I sit down with women who are building, breaking, and rebuilding their businesses on their own terms. We talk about the messy middle, the mindset shifts, and the systems that help you lead like a CEO. So here's my question for you today. What happens when you've built a business you're proud of, but you know there's a bigger version of it waiting for you? Today, I'm joined by Vanessa Violette, a seasoned founder who has built a strategic consultancy and design studio alongside her husband. She's navigated the realities of wearing every hat and is now standing at the edge of her next level, asking the same questions many of us face. What's possible from here, and what might be getting in the way? If you're ready to hear a grounded, honest, and very real conversation about growth, leadership, and evolution, you'll love this episode. Please welcome the brilliant and boldly evolving Vanessa Violette. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm
Boldly
so excited.
evolving. I'm
You
so
are.
excited that I'm boldly evolving. So much better than stumbling forward through life. But
You didn't strike me that way at all. So let's start off, and let's start our listeners off, Vanessa, by could you tell us a little bit about what you do? What is your business?
So I run a strategic consultancy and design studio. My partner is my husband, so that's a whole other can of worms. But we've been doing it for over 20 years now. We started providing branding and design services, and as the world changed and we realized what we were really providing was, it's not designed for design sake, where it's grounded in strategy and communications. A logo only gets you so far, the creative only gets you so far if it isn't actually solving a real problem, which means that we need to understand, really what a business is trying to achieve, what the challenges are, who the audience is, and bringing all of that together in a consultancy that means we're not just doing the strategic part and then saying, go find somebody that's going to solve that for you. We can say, this is the problem we're trying to solve, and really identify it and then deliver what they actually need. We've done it for global brands. We do it for small local Vermont businesses that are near and dear to our heart, and nonprofits. So generally, though, we work with smaller teams.
I was going to ask, so I'm glad you touched on that. I have a feeling that many of our listeners can resonate with everything that you just shared and why you do what you do. We'll talk at the end about how they can get in touch with you if they want to learn more. But say a little bit about what led you and your husband to start this business. Take us on that.
So I would love to say, from a personal standpoint, that this was like my big vision, and we're going to do this. But we met at work at a different design studio, and he struck out on his own as a freelance designer, and I fell into it. Really, I wanted to help him with his business, which is ultimately still what I do. I help people with their business, and that is really my passion. I would love to say that it was like I came from this like great place of confidence. It was just more like, I'm a problem solver. I'm going to help him figure out this part. He's not great at the admin kind of really fell into it, which, I want to be honest about, because I think it's wonderful to have, this North Star and set your path for it and work and work and work. But I didn't. I wanted to help. And I've now turned that into my North Star, because that is what I am passionate about doing. But I just also want to be honest that, this wasn't, my grand plan in life. And, I now have better about figuring those things out. But at the time I was young, and, there's probably some gender role stereotypes and, things baked into that. But, but through that, I found all of these new skills that I was capable of, and, you know, realized that I could be in the room for who I was and what I brought to the table, and kind of while still doing some of the same tactics and executions, how I show up is very different now.
I so appreciate your honesty and willingness to share that part of your journey. I think it's really easy to fall into the trap of feeling like we have to have this grand story or like the North Star story or I was inspired by and I made this great leap, and sometimes that happens and amazing. And many times that's not how entrepreneurial journey
Yeah.
unfolds. I very rarely see a linear path. More often I see paths and stories like yours that are long and winding and not always inspiring, right? Until they are.
Right. You know, and I think it's important to be honest. I work with so many founders
Hmm.
who, you know, have either felt the pressure to craft a story about, you know, kind of having this, you know, this path that they laid out. But the ones I'm always like drawn to the most are the ones who are really honest of like, look, I started this, it was like a get rich quick scheme. And then I built it into this great, wonderful thing or whatever. It was, you know, you know, necessity, you know, it was founded, we couldn't pay the bills. So I started selling this out of the whatever, the back of my car or, you know, and I think that's um, really human.
Yes,
And
I do.
I don't love these, you know, I think to say, you know, if you have a vision and then follow steps, you know, 1 through 10, you will be successful too. I think that's a false narrative. And I think
We know
we
those.
always need to make sure that the human, our humanness,
Yes.
is kind of baked into, you know, our founding and our next step and our vision and all of that.
I so appreciate that. And I think that's one of the ways that you and I clicked is that we share those values. So one of the things that we talked about and, and speaking of the authenticity and the realness of your story, right? You said you kind of fell into this because it was what your husband did and you wanted to support him. In our last conversation, we talked a little bit about you kind of realizing that you might be done with being, I think you said the producer behind the scenes and ready to build something that was maybe more your own or more a little bit different. I don't want to put words into your mouth, but say a
Yeah,
little.
no, I think my willingness to be more forward facing, right? So I will say that in the early years, I kind of rationalized, you know, he is an incredible presenter, he's, you know, speaker, and so it was he was out in front and I was the person, you know, behind the scenes kind of running everything. And I took pride in that. I took pride in the work that I did, but to be honest, I really hid behind that. You know, I can look back and say, like, oh, I hid behind that. Like, oh, well, he's in the spot. I'm just going to stand back here. This is where I belong. This is where I'm good. Now, those things are still true. There are other people that need to be in the spotlight. And I want to be the producer right behind the curtain, pulling all the strings, making my puppets do their stuff. But I'm doing it from a place of confidence and leadership versus fear and hiding behind it. And that allows me to actually be a more effective consultant, producer, whatever. There is nothing I love more than seeing a CEO get up in front of, you know, the all company annual meeting and say the words that I have written like they are his own or her own. And that is, and it's not because I'm afraid of the spotlight. I just don't have the ego to get there. I want to help people. I want to see others succeed. So whether it's a CEO or the students that I mentor or the young kind of up and coming, you know, entry level marketing people, that being able to help somebody step into whatever role they're in and succeed at it, knowing that I help give them the skills or the words or the courage or the tools, that is what makes me tick.
Yeah.
So again, still the producer
Yeah.
writing.
I love the nuance behind your journey, and it's not this cookie cutter or straight and narrow, this then this, right? Or I realized this wasn't working and I made a pivot. I'm really aware as I hear you talk about this how you embrace your role as the producer, right? And you entering into this initially to support your husband's venture, right? And then through that, finding your own place and then realizing it's not that it's not that, it's just there's more.
There's
Tell
more.
tell me a little bit more about if there was like a moment or certain types of experiences that led you to realize that there was more. There is more.
Mm, I think there's a couple of moments that I've had. I remember the first time the first time I had a client that didn't know my husband's name at all.
Wow.
Um,
That must have been huge for you.
that was great, and it was just a really nice feeling, and it felt a little bit, but I was conscious that it felt like there was no safety net.
Interesting.
And being able to compare that to, or contrast it to, thinking back on moments where, for whatever reason, whether it was the industry or maybe an old school company, that there, where I spent a lot of years where I was the only woman in the room. And there were a couple spaces that it felt like it wasn't that I was the only woman in the room. I was the only woman in the room. And I was there not even as his business partner, as his wife, which was, um, ugh, I want to barf thinking about it. Um,
I so appreciate the statement.
yeah, just like kind of gross, like systemic misogyny, and
Yeah.
um, and then all of a sudden to be in the space and no one knows who he is, but that feeling of there's no safety net, and it, the moment of being like, yeah, but it's fine. I'm here. I've done all of this stuff. I don't need that safety net.
Yeah, and it's both. It's not a glorified journey. There's not some, fantasy story here of like I stepped out from behind the scenes and aha, right?
Yeah,
There's the fear and all the feelings that come with like not having the safety net. And then also, how I imagine it must have felt to have that first client, not even know who your husband is, right? That their
right,
success is because of working with you.
right. And I think the other piece of it was, um, I wasn't aware. There was so much that I wasn't aware that if maybe I had been hiding behind him or thinking of him
Hmm.
as it wasn't a conscious thing. It wasn't until it was gone that I went, oh,
Hmm.
okay.
Yeah.
I had a responsibility. I didn't realize, I wasn't aware that that fear or insecurity was there.
Mhm.
And then kind of looking back and go, oh yeah, I guess I had a bit of that.
Yeah. It sounds like it's not something that stopped you though. Like you noticed it, you honored it, right? And here we are, still moving forward.
Yeah, yes. Though I did have a moment where I recently,
Mhm.
where I slipped, right?
Yeah,
Kind of
so
a two steps
normal.
forward, one step
So
back kind of thing.
normal.
I slipped and I was meeting somebody, and they were kind of a big celebrity artist, and I was really in awe. So I was a little bit nervous, but like I said, I hadn't done that much thinking about acknowledging my nervousness.
Yeah.
So I was unprepared, and because it was in the art world, and it just so happened that I was meeting this woman, I was meeting this person for, um, in one role, in my role as a consultant, but they had previously met my husband in the art world. And instead of introducing myself in my professional capacity, I introduced myself as his wife. And he wasn't even there. The artist didn't even know. I was flustered and nervous, and I fell back on this safety net. And I immediately was like, oh, I can't believe I did that. And was like, I will never do that again.
Yes. What a good learning. You're like, oh, I did that and lesson
Yeah.
learned. So what I'm getting really curious to hear more about, Vanessa, is, you're still in it, and I imagine this is going to be, a lengthy journey. It's not an overnight change. But as you step more and more into this forward-facing role and you step more into who you are as a service provider and support to your clients, how do you see the way that you serve your clients or the vision for your work changing as you more fully embrace this forward-facing role?
Hmm. I think, right, so much of this, like you said, it is nuance. It's not so much of this massive, you know, 180. It's more about how I show up doing the things that I have continued to do. I make different choices about the specific things that I do, but that's a different conversation. This feels more um, big vision. I think I am now able to bring my own experience and see that in other people, especially working with solopreneurs, especially working with female solopreneurs, or small business owners. The world has changed. And what used to be nice to have, or the bells and whistles, are now a necessity. People need to promote themselves in ways that they have never had to do before. You used to just be able to be good at the thing that you did, and word of mouth, and your name was in the yellow pages, and this makes sounds of a bazillion years old. But now, this need to, make sure that you have, whatever your online presence is and how far you're willing to take that, and to be able to talk about yourself, which is so tough for so many people. It's easier if you can hide behind a brand, but if you in any way are baked into your brand, um, that your individual personal story, that gets more challenging for people. I think it's even challenging for nonprofits, for executive directors who, you know, you can't hide behind the mission. If you are in the world of development, it is all relationship based, and those relationships are personal. They are one to one. And, you know, trying to, hide behind the mission where it really needs to be personal. And I think finding the confidence, finding the words to be able to do that comfortably and authentically. It's it's never easy, but it gets easier if you have the words, and the words are authentic to who you are, because then it's not a lie. You're not trying to put on the show. You're not trying to copy the whatever the latest, algorithm or best practice for a LinkedIn post is. It is you. And if you're talking about you and your
Yes.
business, then it's a lot easier. Still hard,
Yes.
but it's a lot easier.
Yeah, exactly. I can't help but notice the parallels between the work that you do and the work that you support. And I'm going to say, especially female entrepreneurs, because that's the space that I live in, compared to your own personal journey. Just stepping out into the spotlight, claiming your voice, claiming your authority. What would you say? And maybe it's easier to answer this from the perspective of how you support your clients. What would you say is the biggest mindset shift that is either required or that you see folks go through when they gain confidence to step into the spotlight?
Hmm. I think there's a couple moments that happen. I think um there is a maybe a bit of a reckoning, um with they have to do it, right? That's the
Yeah.
I think, so there's that, like, this is, you have to to do these things? I think it is, right, it's all, without trying to get too much into all the conversations around imposter syndrome and things like that. I think it's the willingness, it's one, recognizing that there's, the way that I say it is pretty kind of blunt and I don't know, somebody say crass, but ultimately this idea that, hey, if you don't do it, somebody dumber will.
That's powerful.
Meaning, and what I mean by that, out there in the world, there are geniuses, amazing people whose IQs are off the charts. Most everybody out there is just a normal human trying to figure it all out. And if they can do it, so can you. So kind of this, anybody can learn this, or anybody can do this. You don't need you don't need to go back to get your MBA to build the website for your yoga business, right? You can do this too. And figuring out, helping them get a little bit of tools so that there's some confidence of like, okay, yeah, okay, I see proof that I might be able to do this. And then ultimately being willing to take that. It's a leap of faith in yourself. And sometimes it's just, holding your breath and hitting send or post or publish, whatever that is. Or even just going to a networking event and trying out the new, hi, I'm so and so, and this is what I do. But I think that leap of faith is that moment, and then you see it get a little bit more comfortable, and that shift of, okay, I'm going to try it, and that's okay.
I love that. And if I could piggyback off of this a little bit, I think one of the biggest mindset shifts, and I'm curious to hear your perspective on this too, Vanessa, is moving from this idea of like you said earlier, like you have to do it, right? Or feeling like you have to sell yourself, into this mindset of knowing that we're going to make a blanket assumption that that the listeners, that those women who are called to provide a service are good at what they do, that when they have the ideal client in front of them, they know how to help, that they're gifted in the service they offer, right? And to move from this idea of I have to sell myself to somebody, to this idea of I have a gift, right? If I have somebody who's suffering from a particular problem and I know how to help, right? We're almost doing them a disservice by not kind of waving our hand and going, I can help with that, right? We're just
Right.
leaving these people to suffer.
Right. Well, and I think it's also, right, the difference of selling yourself versus showing up as who you are,
Yeah. Letting
right?
people
So
know that you're
letting
here.
people know, this is who I am. I'm here.
Hmm.
If this is the right fit, it's the right fit.
Yeah.
But they're never gonna know if it's the right fit if you don't tell them who you are. It
Mm.
doesn't necessarily need to be a hard sell.
Yeah, yeah. Tell us a little bit more about how you handle, like, when you meet clients or just fellow female entrepreneurs who think they need tactics, right? I hear all the time, folks will come and say, I need a new website. I need a new content marketing strategy. I need a new this or that that's probably expensive and they don't know how to do. And you said, you don't have to go back and get your MBA to build a website.
You know,
How do you approach clients, or what's your advice when people come to you thinking that they need tactics or this or that, but what they really need is a
yeah.
mindset shift or an overall strategy?
My first question, usually, I get an ask, right? So, it's some sort of tactic, right? A website, a logo, a new logo,
Right.
logo
New brand
refresh.
colors, new
Um,
pictures.
my first question is why?
Yeah.
Why do you think you need that?
Hmm.
Tell me what's going on with your business that you think you need that,
Yeah.
right? Because, and maybe it does,
Maybe it does.
right?
Maybe
Maybe
it
it
does.
does.
But
No, it's not impossible, but oftentimes it is somebody told them they should, or, and this getting to the heart of what's happening with the organization that you need this, that you think you need this. So let's talk about that. And then let's talk about the actual problem you're trying to solve and then figure out what the tactics are or what the tools are that you need to deal with that. Maybe now isn't the smartest time to do that. I mean, there's so many things, and not being afraid. I just had this conversation a couple weeks ago. Not being afraid to say, "I'd love to let you give me your money and give you the new logo and website and language, new name, whatever it is that you're asking for. But I really don't think you need that right now. I think that will actually be a waste of your money. You've given me, an overview of what's going on. What if you start here? And I think you have some decisions you need to make. Maybe you do need a new logo, or maybe you need new language, or maybe you just need a new strategic plan. You need to start with this decision or these 3 decisions. Call me in 2 months or 6 months.
Yeah.
I'd love to help you. But right now, if I give you what you're asking for, that's not actually going to help you solve the problem that you're trying to solve.
I think that really speaks to your authenticity and your integrity. And I personally think that's just such an important quality for any service provider to have. I suspect even, we're talking about marketing or business strategy, but I suspect even, wellness providers listening can relate to this. Is when someone comes with a symptom, right? We're doing a disservice by just treating the symptom without holding the bigger picture in our minds. And I love the question that you asked of why. Why?
I mean,
Why do you think we need that?
right. And I will say, on the flip side, I do believe in tactics and execution and helping
Completely.
people implement them, because I think the other side of this space is that there are so many consultants out there, and giving everyone the benefit of the doubt that they're providing good service and they're providing what their clients have asked for. But the amount of organizations I work with who, however they came to me, and I'll say, well, let's talk about your strategy. And they say, oh, we have a strategic plan. We have one. We paid this consultant, right? And then they go pull it out of a drawer. It's sat in a drawer.
Mm-hmm.
Very expensive document that's supposed to be guiding their everyday decisions and helping them implement change and tactics and all of those things. And it's sitting in a drawer because, and there may be great, wonderful strategies in there, but nobody helped them figure out how to implement them.
Yeah.
And trying to find that place that we can do both.
So, well, speaking of strategy and why, right, shifting the focus back a little bit to you, Vanessa, what are the next steps for you as you step into the spotlight, right? Take up more space, step into your authority. What's next? What do you see unfolding for you in your business?
I think, this is going to be a little bit more tactical than
Totally
great
welcome.
big
There's time and a
vision,
place for that.
right? I need to pull my strategic plan out of the drawer. No, I mean, I think the thing I've been really trying to focus on is identify. I've had the wonderful experience of being able to try and do so many things. So really, and I'm so grateful for that, because I have this really wide understanding of so many different functions and the actual nitty gritty of what it takes to get something out the door. And also being at a really high level and kind of all the space in between. But just because I can doesn't mean I should, right? And figuring out the things that, saying that's not a space I want to do. So narrowing my offering, I should say, in terms of executional items, and also the industries that I am focusing on the types of organizations that I work with. I think we started in the outdoor space. We started in like the snowboard space specifically. And it's something that I'm super passionate about and is a big part of our life and always will be. But from there to outdoor, so there's a lot of consumer product goods in my background. But recently, um, from my own personal involvement in frankly my kids' lives and in the Vermont community in general, there's a lot of really exciting tech innovation happening. I know it's happening everywhere, but in Vermont, it's not just that there's all of these businesses, coming from a rural community. Um, it's not just that there's these new businesses, there's all of this effort and kind of like collective consciousness about workforce development and how it impacts rural communities and our state in general. And um, I love it's really, really exciting. And one of the things that I love about it, aside from kind of seeing all of these young people get involved in all these amazing programs and how they ladder up to these great, big, wonderful corporations that are doing great things in the world, um, is that it's really about kind of helping people find their way and getting to tell these really complex stories, really like deeply complex engineering stories in a simple way that a layman can understand. That you don't need to have, a PhD from MIT to get it because, and from a narrative, copywriting communication space, that is a challenge I'm really, really enjoying. So this, there's complexity in every organization, but this stuff is like a whole new level of like getting to understand, what the thing is, and then how do we tell everybody else about it in a way that they will care and it will have meaning to them. And that, from a communication standpoint, that is really challenging and fun and exciting and interesting, for me. And to be fair, a lot of these tech startups are started by those people with the really high, engineering, IQs and everything like that. And they are so incredible what they do. And they're often not great at being able to explain it. And being able to work with clients like that is really, really exciting. Um, so for me personally, that's kind of become this new kind of direction that I'm passionate about, because there's an exciting challenge for me, and it gets back to kind of that heart of the thing that kind of makes me tick, is that helping people.
Supporting businesses. Yes. Yeah, I
So
can just see your focus like as it gets clearer and clearer, and I can feel your passion coming through for what you do. And as you continue this journey of stepping, more into the spotlight, I can just imagine how many more businesses you're going to touch and support. And I'm excited for you for all of
yeah,
that.
thank you.
Before we wrap up, Vanessa, I would love for you to share what is the best way for listeners to connect with you or learn more about your work.
You can go to my website at violetteconsulting.com. You can find me on Instagram, just change follow my name, and LinkedIn, all of the spots. You're not going to see a ton of LinkedIn posts and things like that. I only do it when it's authentic. So if it's there, it's real. So
I love that. Thank you for that. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for your willingness to share so vulnerably and openly
yeah,
about your journey and all the little tidbits. I feel like I could pull 5 or 6 different quotes out of this that were really just gold, in my opinion. And thank you, listener, for tuning in to FoundHer Rising. If today's episode resonated with you, make sure to follow the show, share it with another founder, and leave a quick review. It helps more women find these conversations. You can always connect with me on LinkedIn or learn more about how I support women grow and scale service-based businesses at HakkolaHorizons.com. Until next time, keep rising and keep building the business that gives you freedom to live, lead, and create on your terms.